anything illegal. I'm not doing anything illegal.
America is completely racist.
These are 28 black actors Hollywood has blacklisted, and their stories prove that fame isn't always as shiny as it looks.
That's not the finest hour of my life.
They went from red carpets and fan love to scandals, lawsuits, and headlines that made casting directors run the other way. Some of them deserved it, others just spoke too loud, but all of them paid the price. Let me tell you about Jussie Smollett at first, because he was riding higher than almost anyone in Hollywood when Empire was at its peak. He wasn't just another actor on the show. He was the emotional anchor, as Jamal Lyon, the openly gay son in a dysfunctional music dynasty. He brought vulnerability, soul, and raw talent that connected deeply with audiences. People weren't just watching him act, they were watching him live out a groundbreaking role for Black and LGBTQ representation on primetime television. And then, in one single night, he managed to burn it all down.
January 29th, 2019, police were called to an incident. They see an actor called Jussie Smollett with a noose around his neck. He says that he was the victim of a hate crime.
In January 2019, Jussie made headlines claiming he had been the victim of a violent hate crime in Chicago.
Everybody immediately thought this is what Trump's America is like. You had people in MAGA hats chasing after a black man in the night, tying a rope around his neck, calling him racist slurs, calling him homophobic slurs.
He said 2 men attacked him at 2 a.m., threw racist and homophobic slurs at him, and even tied a noose around his neck. The world rallied behind him. Celebrities, politicians, and fans flooded social media with messages of support. But as police dug deeper, the story began to unravel. Investigators said Smollett had staged the whole thing, paying 2 men he knew to carry out the attack so he could boost his fame and negotiate a bigger salary. The public went from sympathy to outrage in record time. The courts found him guilty on multiple counts of filing a false police report. Later, an appeals court tossed out the conviction on a technicality, but that didn't erase the damage.
They had actually identified who these guys were. I was like, we got this dude now.
The twists.
Studios don't forgive easily, especially when an actor becomes synonymous with deception. The scandal turned him from a rising star into an industry pariah almost overnight. Even though he's tried directing and dabbling in smaller projects, Smollett's name is still toxic. The truth is, Hollywood didn't blacklist him because of one mistake. It blacklisted him because his mistake made the entire industry look like fools for believing him.
God, I love you. Hallelujah. Thank you, Father God, for putting me through what you put me through, but I'm here and I'm happy.
Cuba Gooding Jr. had one of those once-in-a-lifetime Hollywood moments that every actor dreams of. In 1996, standing on the Oscar stage for Jerry Maguire, he screamed, "Show me the money," and the world screamed it back. He wasn't just a supporting actor anymore, he was the guy everyone wanted to see win. That performance was electric, full of charm, charisma, and the kind of energy that makes casting directors line up. People thought he was about to become the next Denzel Washington or Will Smith, a box office powerhouse with both comedic and dramatic range.
Cuba credible. That's what we're asking this morning.
But instead of climbing higher, his career made one wrong turn after another. He took parts in mediocre movies, passed up projects from acclaimed directors, and slowly drifted from leading man into the shadows of Hollywood. By the time he realized it, the magic from Jerry Maguire had slipped through his fingers.
And harassment is also accusing actor Cuba Gooding Jr. His producer filed the original lawsuit last month, accusing Combs of forcing him to find sex workers and pressuring him into doing sexual things.
And then the real scandal hit. In 2019, more than 20 women came forward accusing Cuba of sexual misconduct, some with stories going back years. Suddenly, he wasn't just the charming Oscar winner. He was the headline of every tabloid and the subject of a full-on police investigation. He was arrested in New York, faced multiple charges, and the court of public opinion had already handed down its verdict. Guilty in the eyes of Hollywood. Eventually, Cuba struck a deal and pleaded guilty to a lesser charge, avoiding prison. Legally, it kept him from complete ruin, but reputationally, it was over. No studio wants to bankroll a movie with a lead actor whose name is tied to 24 accusations.
Way too hard to try to convince. You could see it written all over his face. I mean,
For Hollywood, it wasn't about whether he served time. It was about trust. When your face is associated with scandal and alleged predatory behavior, you don't get invited back to the A-list party.
You afraid to even ask the question, am I afraid of the blowback? Because you would say, am I getting blowback for simply being honest?
Monique is one of those rare talents who proved she could do it all. Stand-up comedy, sitcoms, and then a powerhouse leap into serious acting. Her defining moment came with Precious in 2009, playing an abusive mother so convincingly that audiences were left shaken. She didn't just act, she transformed. That role won her the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress, cementing her as one of the most gifted performers of her generation. But what should have been a golden ticket to A-list roles turned into the beginning of a long, ugly war with Hollywood's power players.
Tyler Perry, Oprah Winfrey, and Lee Daniels of stopping her from getting roles in Hollywood.
Instead of celebrating her victory, the industry turned its back on her. And the reason wasn't her talent. It was her refusal to play the Hollywood game. After winning her Oscar, Monique refused to do unpaid overseas press for Precious. For her, it was simple. She wasn't contracted or compensated for it, so why should she? But in an industry run by powerful egos, that choice was seen as arrogance. Behind closed doors, she says, calls started going out, whispers that she was difficult and ungrateful. She named names too. Oprah Winfrey, Lee Daniels, and Tyler Perry, three of the most influential black figures in Hollywood, were accused of shutting doors on her career. Suddenly, the offers dried up. Here was an Oscar winner, but no one was calling.
Coming behind you, you better give a damn.
Instead of staying quiet, Monique doubled down. She went public with her story, calling out the industry for underpaying black women and punishing them for speaking out. In 2019, she sued Netflix for offering her a fraction of what white comedians were being paid for stand-up specials. That lawsuit turned into a cultural flashpoint. Some saw her as a hero. Others said she was burning every bridge she had left. Eventually, she settled with Netflix, and years later, reconciled with Lee Daniels. But the damage was done. Hollywood had already written her off as a troublemaker.
But one.
Wesley Snipes owned the screen with charisma, martial arts precision, and a coolness that made him one of Hollywood's most bankable black leading men. New Jack City, White Men Can't Jump, Demolition Man. Hit after hit proved he could carry both gritty dramas and blockbuster action. But it was Blade in 1998 that immortalized him. Long before Marvel became a billion-dollar empire, Snipes turned a half-vampire comic book hero into a global phenomenon. Fans credit him with paving the way for today's superhero craze.
Snipes has received the maximum sentence. Prosecutors had pressed for that maximum sentence of 3 years because Snipes did not file his taxes.
The cracks began showing with whispers from sets. On Blade, Trinity, reports surfaced that Snipes refused to speak to his co-stars, would only communicate with the director through post-it notes, and spent most of the shoot locked in his trailer. Cast members described him as uncooperative and paranoid, even refusing to open his eyes during a scene, forcing CGI artists to digitally fix his performance. That reputation for being difficult began sticking, but the real bomb dropped with his taxes. In 2008, Snipes was convicted of willful failure to file federal income tax returns, not just once, but for multiple years. He owed millions, and the government made an example out of him. The superstar who once headlined blockbusters was sentenced to 3 years in federal prison. Serving 28 months behind bars was devastating for his career. By the time he got out in 2013, the industry had moved on, and his spot at the top was gone.
Wesley Snipes is back in action in The Expendables 3 and poking some fun at his past there. As we all know, Wesley spent nearly 3 years in prison.
Snipes did make a comeback attempt with The Expendables 3 and Coming to America. But those were small reminders of who he used to be, not proof that he had reclaimed his throne. Terrence Howard had everything it takes to be a Hollywood powerhouse: raw talent, screen presence, and the ability to make any role feel magnetic. His breakthrough in Hustle and Flow, 2005, was a cultural moment. Playing a struggling Memphis pimp who dreams of becoming a rapper, Howard delivered such a gritty, authentic performance that it earned him an Oscar nomination. Audiences felt his pain, his ambition, and his hunger. It was the kind of role that cements a career, and for a while, it looked like Terrence was destined for the A-list. That momentum only grew when Marvel cast him as James Rhodey Rhodes in the first Iron Man, a role that was supposed to tie him into one of the most lucrative franchises of all time. But instead of soaring higher, Howard's career came crashing down under the weight of scandals, lawsuits, and his own self-sabotage. The Iron Man fallout became infamous. Howard was reportedly the highest-paid actor in the first film, even above Robert Downey Jr. When the sequel came around, Marvel slashed his salary, offering him a fraction of what he'd earned before. Howard felt betrayed and refused, leading to Don Cheadle permanently replacing him in the role. To fans, it looked like Marvel had dumped him. To insiders, it branded him as difficult, the one word no actor wants attached to their name. But the real damage came from his personal life. Howard has been embroiled in multiple lawsuits and accusations of domestic violence from ex-wives, and disturbingly, he has admitted to some of those incidents himself in interviews. That kind of admission doesn't just stain your reputation, it obliterates it. On top of that, he later sued Fox, the network behind his hit show Empire, and even his own talent agency, claiming financial exploitation. Orlando Brown's story is the definition of wasted potential. Back in the early 2000s, he was one of Disney Channel's brightest stars, playing Eddie Thomas on That's So Raven. As Raven's goofy best friend, Orlando had the kind of comic timing and natural charm that made him unforgettable. Kids loved him, parents found him entertaining, and he seemed destined to ride that Disney wave into bigger Hollywood projects. What set him apart was that he wasn't just funny, he could act, sing, and rap too. He had all the tools to become a multi-hyphenate star like so many of his Disney peers. But once the cameras stopped rolling on That's So Raven in 2007, Orlando's career unraveled in ways nobody could have predicted. The trouble started with arrests, and they just kept coming. Drug possession, DUIs, domestic violence, burglary. His rap sheet became longer than his IMDb page. Every time he made headlines, it wasn't for a new role, but for another run-in with the law. And in Hollywood, reliability is currency. Studios don't risk millions on someone who might end up in jail before the movie wraps. Orlando's reputation as unreliable was cemented. But what made things worse was his very public battle with addiction. In interviews, Orlando admitted to heavy drug use, and his erratic behavior made the internet turn him into a meme rather than a star. Isaiah Washington had one of those career-defining roles actors dream of. As Dr. Preston Burke on Grey's Anatomy, he wasn't just another character. He was central to the drama, a brilliant surgeon with intensity and presence that made him stand out. Fans loved him, critics respected him, and he was a cornerstone of one of TV's biggest shows. For a while, Isaiah looked like he was about to break through into that rare space where television actors become household names with lasting power. But his career didn't stall because of lack of talent. It detonated because of one scandal that Hollywood simply couldn't forgive. It started with a heated on-set fight in 2006 between Washington and co-star Patrick Dempsey. In the middle of the altercation, Isaiah used a homophobic slur, reportedly aimed at T.R. Knight, another cast member who would later come out as gay. That alone might have been career suicide, but he doubled down in spectacular fashion. At the 2007 Golden Globes, while trying to clarify the incident, Isaiah repeated the same slur in front of the press. Instead of defending himself, he gave the controversy new life, and that was it. ABC cut him from Grey's Anatomy, and just like that, his run as a primetime star was over. Tyrese Gibson should have had it all. He broke in as a singer, a model, then transitioned into acting with the kind of natural charisma that made audiences instantly connect. His role as Roman Pierce in the Fast and Furious franchise cemented him as a fan favorite, the loud, funny, wisecracking guy who always stole scenes with his energy. For years, Tyrese was riding high, part of one of the biggest franchises in Hollywood history. He had music, acting, and fame on lock, but what kept him in the spotlight was his drama, and that drama slowly turned him into one of Hollywood's riskiest names. The biggest crack in his image came during his ugly feud with Dwayne "The Rock" Rock Johnson. Tyrese lashed out when The Rock landed his own Fast and Furious spin-off, claiming it ruined the schedule for the main franchise and cost him a paycheck. He went public, ranting on social media, even threatening to quit the films altogether. Fans saw it as petty, studios saw it as unprofessional, and suddenly Tyrese went from being the comic relief to the problem child of the franchise.
I've often told people that, I don't have a talent, I have a gift.
Anthony Anderson was supposed to be one of those rare cases where a comedian graduates from sidekick roles into being a full-blown leading man. For years, he was the funny guy popping up in comedies and supporting parts. But when Blackish hit, everything changed. As Dre Johnson, the over-the-top yet relatable dad, navigating race, family, and culture in America, Anderson became a household name. The show wasn't just a hit, it was critically acclaimed, Emmy-nominated, and considered groundbreaking for modern network TV. He had finally made it, a starring role on a hit sitcom, hosting gigs, and recognition as one of Hollywood's most bankable black comedic stars. But then came the kind of scandal that Hollywood hates: accusations.
And actor Anthony Anderson, meantime, is denying claims that he assaulted a woman a year ago.
In 2018, Anthony Anderson was investigated by the LAPD after a woman accused him of sexual assault. The case was eventually dropped due to lack of evidence, and he was never charged. Legally, he walked away untouched. But in Hollywood, the mere headline is enough to stain a career. Studios and networks aren't looking for not guilty, they're looking for squeaky clean. The accusation alone was enough to make executives nervous about attaching his name to major projects. The problem wasn't that people didn't find him funny anymore, it was that his name now carried baggage.
Mama! Yeah, baby. How you doing tonight, Mama? I'm wonderful. You doing wonderful? Yes.
The fallout was subtle but noticeable. Instead of starring in another sitcom on the level of Blackish, Anderson shifted into hosting and appearances. He became the face of game shows like We Are Family with his mom, and even hosted the 75th Primetime Emmys in 2024. Hosting gigs keep him visible, but they don't carry the same prestige as anchoring a beloved sitcom. In other words, Hollywood didn't exile him completely. They just quietly moved him to the side.
I was hoping you would read the first 100 pages of my bill. Or perhaps I can recite the first 100 pages to you. Let's see here. I, Stephen Q. Urkel, hereby submit to Congress a bill pertaining to clean air.
Jaleel White is the perfect example of how one role can make you a legend and a prisoner at the same time. In the 90s, he wasn't just famous, he was everywhere. As Steve Urkel on Family Matters, the suspenders-wearing, squeaky-voiced nerd who turned "Did I do that?" into a national catchphrase, he became a cultural icon. Urkel was supposed to be a side character, but White's performance stole the show so completely that the writers restructured the series around him. For years, he ruled primetime television, and kids who grew up in that era still remember him as the face of 90s sitcoms. He should have ridden that wave into bigger and better roles, but instead, the role that made him also locked him in a box he never escaped from.
Howdy-ho, guys. I came to Washington to pass my own Clean Air Act. The Urkel Air Act. Most people think it's very difficult to get a bill passed.
The problem was typecasting, and it hit White harder than most. Hollywood couldn't see him as anyone other than Urkel. He admitted that playing the character even caused physical strain. Years of contorting his voice and posture left him with lasting pain. Worse, no matter what he did after Family Matters, casting directors, audiences, and critics only saw the nerd. It didn't matter that he had range, charisma, or comedic chops. Urkel was glued to his identity.
You've got this audience here, and that's
that part's fun.
To play off.
It's always great to have a natural audience. The audience has really been reacting.
White never stopped working. He did voice acting, most notably as the original voice of Sonic the Hedgehog, and appeared in shows like Grown Ups, Me, Myself, and I, The After Party, and even a role in the upcoming Star Wars Skeleton Crew. He's also popped up in films like Dreamgirls and Hustle. Recently, he found a fresh lane as a game show host on Flipside, showing his charisma is still intact. But let's be real, most people, even when they see him today, still think of him as Urkel first.
have a show that could service the African American community and all of the sponsors that that supported their network. So they created a slot for an African American family show.
Darius McCrary will always be remembered as Eddie Winslow from Family Matters. In the 90s, that role made him part of millions of people's households every Friday night. Eddie was the cool older brother, funny, charming, and the perfect counterbalance to Urkel's awkwardness. For a generation of fans, McCrary wasn't just another sitcom actor. He was a symbol of the black family sitcom era that shaped television. Audiences loved his charisma, and it seemed like he had all the tools to transition into a bigger Hollywood career once the show ended. But instead of catapulting forward like some of his co-stars, McCrary found himself trapped by typecasting and later overshadowed by personal scandals that Hollywood has little patience for.
They created this show because they knew that there was going to be a need for that slot to be filled.
The curse of Eddie Winslow followed him. Casting directors couldn't see past the role, and the industry didn't offer him characters that could elevate him beyond his sitcom legacy. Instead of leading roles in films or high-profile TV dramas, McCrary ended up in smaller projects, direct-to-video films, guest spots on shows, and scattered voice work. He even voiced Jazz in the 2007 Transformers movie, a big gig that could have been a springboard, but it never turned into a full comeback. Hollywood wasn't interested in making him more than Eddie.
Whether people understand it or realize it or not, I've said this before, we've all been inappropriately touched in Hollywood, period. That's what it is.
Then came the personal headlines, and they weren't flattering. McCrary faced multiple arrests related to unpaid child support, and the tabloids were quick to paint him as another fallen child star in trouble. When people read more about your legal battles than your acting credits, your image is basically finished in Hollywood's eyes. Those controversies made him look unstable, and studios don't gamble on instability. That said, McCrary hasn't quit. He's appeared in shows like American Soul on BET and Monogamy on UMC, and he's even started working on his own production projects to create roles for himself. It shows he's still hungry, still fighting.
She revealed that Damon Wayans didn't want her to play his wife when they were casting My Wife and Kids. The reason why is because, according to Tisha, Damon didn't see himself playing next to her after she became known as Gina from Martin. Tisha decided to go on to the audition anyway, ignoring the advice of her agent who told her that this could ruin her career.
Tisha Campbell is one of those names that instantly triggers nostalgia. She dominated the 90s sitcom world, first as Gina Waters on Martin, and later as the hilarious mom on My Wife and Kids. For years, she was everywhere, charming, funny, and the kind of actress who could steal a scene with just a look or a punchline. Her chemistry with Martin Lawrence made Martin one of the most iconic black sitcoms of all time, and her quick wit on My Wife and Kids proved she wasn't just riding one wave, she was a sitcom queen in her own right. For fans, Campbell wasn't just another actress, she was family. But Hollywood has a cruel way of sidelining women once they're no longer young ingenues, and Tisha's career is one of the clearest examples of that.
Spike put all the light-skinned girls in one hotel.
What?
A nicer hotel. He put the dark-skinned girls in a motel. I was always at the motel with everybody else.
Yes.
When Martin ended, Tisha still had star power, but opportunities became smaller and less flashy. By the time My Wife and Kids wrapped up, the offers for leading roles all but dried up. She stayed working, popping up in shows like Everybody Hates Chris, Empire, Dr. Ken, and Outmatched, but none of those roles matched the cultural weight of her earlier work. It wasn't her talent that shrank. It was Hollywood's narrow imagination. Ageism hit her hard, and as a black woman in an industry that already struggles with representation, the gap only widened.
Mostly when I talked about me being raped, it was for people who would pay attention to their children.
Campbell herself has been open about her struggles. She's spoken about personal battles, including her divorce, and rebuilding her life, which only made fans respect her more. But the industry doesn't reward resilience the way audiences do. Despite that, Tisha Campbell never disappeared. She's been working for over 4 decades, still delivering, still showing up. still proving her talent hasn't gone anywhere. Lorenz Tate was the definition of a 90s leading man. Smooth, charismatic, and endlessly talented, he lit up the screen in cult classics like Menace II Society, Dead Presidents, and of course, Love Jones. That last one, especially, made him a cultural icon, playing the poetic, sensitive romantic lead who broke stereotypes about how black men were portrayed in cinema. Women adored him, men respected him, and critics recognized his ability to shift between gritty crime dramas and soulful love stories. For a while, Tate looked unstoppable. He had the looks, the acting chops, and the resume to cement himself as one of Hollywood's greats. And yet, his career never reached the same heights as his peers. Why? Because Tate refused to play Hollywood's game of typecasting.
I'm underrated. I think I'm undervalued in Hollywood. And I think a lot of black folks are undervalued.
After his early success, Tate made it clear he didn't want to take every cliché role Hollywood offered to black actors. The gang member, the sidekick, the comic relief. He wanted to tell authentic stories about black life and roles with depth. Admirable? Absolutely. But in an industry that thrives on stereotypes, that decision came with a cost. Instead of being elevated, he was quietly sidelined. Other stars of his era jumped into bigger, mainstream projects, while Tate deliberately chose smaller, meaningful ones. He kept his integrity, but it meant sacrificing mass exposure.
And as a kid star, around people who were, I had great examples of people to look up to. One, William Allen Young, Shirley Ralph.
Marcus T. Polk had the kind of breakout every kid actor dreams of. As Miles Mitchell, the mischievous little brother on Moesha, he was funny, relatable, and instantly likable. Surrounded by a powerhouse cast that included Brandy and a rotating list of rising stars, Marcus carved out his own lane with sharp timing and natural charm. Fans adored him because he felt authentic, like that younger brother who annoyed you but somehow always won you over. On a hit show like Moesha, he seemed set to follow in the footsteps of other child stars who transitioned into bigger roles. But while the spotlight was there, Hollywood never gave Marcus the chance to grow.
You better say you got an edge, bro.
The biggest hurdle he faced was the transition from child actor to adult performer, one of the toughest shifts in the industry. Once audiences locked him in their minds as the kid from Moesha, it was nearly impossible to sell him as a leading man. Hollywood wasn't offering him opportunities to reinvent himself. Instead, he got scattered roles in smaller films like Roll Bounce and Red Tails, or one-off appearances in shows. He even popped up in The Proud Family, Louder and Prouder. But those roles were nowhere near the breakout he needed.
What it's like to be blindsided. Do not do that to these kids. They got enough obstacles they gotta face. They don't need the man they look up to most.
Taye Diggs was once Hollywood's go-to leading man for rom-coms and dramas that needed charm, sophistication, and just the right amount of swagger. In the late 90s and early 2000s, he was everywhere. How Stella Got Her Groove Back, Brown Sugar, The Best Man, and its sequel cemented him as the guy audiences wanted to see win the girl. He had that rare combination of good looks, acting chops, and screen presence that made him magnetic. For black audiences especially, Diggs represented something refreshing, a romantic lead who wasn't a stereotype, but a fully fleshed out, desirable character. For a while, it looked like he was on a straight shot to becoming a Hollywood fixture. But then, without any scandal or meltdown, he started disappearing from the spaces that made him famous. The real problem wasn't Diggs himself, it was Hollywood. The genres that made him a star started drying up. Romantic comedies stopped being bankable in theaters, replaced by superhero franchises and action tentpoles. And when studios did make rom-coms, they rarely cast black men as the lead anymore. On top of that, ageism crept in. Diggs, once the fresh new face of love stories, suddenly wasn't the hot young lead Hollywood thought audiences wanted. It wasn't that his talent faded. It was that the industry's interest in the kinds of roles he thrived in collapsed.
I said, man, the world needs a great comedy / rom-com right now.
To his credit, Taye never stopped working. He pivoted to television and stage, landing steady roles in shows like Private Practice, Empire, and more recently, All American, where he played Coach Baker, and gained a whole new fan base. He even returned to Broadway, starring in Moulin Rouge, the musical, in 2025. Outside of acting, he branched into podcasts and smaller film projects, showing versatility. But the fact remains, he's not the rom-com king Hollywood once painted him as.
Hey guys, I'm Keke Palmer. I'm an actress, singer, dancer, host, producer, entertainer.
Keke Palmer is the definition of a multi-hyphenate, actress, singer, host, activist, and yet Hollywood has never given her the recognition she deserves. She burst onto the scene in Aquila and the Bee, delivering a performance so powerful that critics and audiences alike knew she was special. From there, she made history as the youngest talk show host in TV history, starred in her own Nickelodeon series, and even stepped into Broadway as the first Black Cinderella. She should have been treated as a generational talent on par with her peers, but instead, her career has been a constant fight against Hollywood's bias and colorism.
Keke is an Emmy Award-winning actress, singer-songwriter, host, producer, author, entrepreneur, and passionate voice of the millennial generation. Keke has starred in over 25 films.
The cracks showed when people began comparing her to Zendaya in 2022. Social media painted Zendaya as the industry's darling, while Keke, despite having just as many milestones, wasn't celebrated at the same level. Keke clapped back with style, reminding the world that she's been breaking barriers since day one. From Nickelodeon to Broadway to winning Emmy Awards, she pointed out what many already knew, but few said out loud. Colorism plays a huge role in who Hollywood elevates and who it sidelines. And when you're outspoken about it, you don't just get ignored, you get quietly pushed aside.
Self in Hollywood and how that's translating into business.
My parents always raised me to speak up and that the truth, you know, it's so cliche, we hear the truth will set you free, but it will, because when you are held back and you don't speak up for yourself, nothing changes.
Keke's story is about being boxed in. As a black child star, she faced stereotypes early on and was repeatedly typecast into the same kinds of roles. Hollywood never knew what to do with her range. The girl who could sing, act, host, and command a stage all at once. Instead of being handed blockbuster franchises, she had to carve her own space. She launched her own platform, Key TV Network, to create opportunities for overlooked black creatives. She hosted Password, kept landing parts in projects like Nope and Hustlers, and still managed to snatch up Emmy wins for her work.
I am a woman, I am an
Cheryl Lee Ralph is living proof that Hollywood can overlook greatness for decades before finally admitting it made a mistake. Back in the 80s, she was already a star, the original Dina Jones in Broadway's Dreamgirls, a role that showcased her powerhouse voice and undeniable presence. She should have been launched into the stratosphere with movie offers and big TV roles.
I persisted. Every time somebody tried to break my spirit, I was like, you know that Beyonce song, "You won't break my soul, you won't break."
But while white actresses with far less talent were catapulted into Hollywood's arms, Ralph spent years on the sidelines, working steadily, but never getting the recognition she deserved. It wasn't because she lacked ability. It was because Hollywood has a long history of ignoring black women, especially those who don't fit its narrow, ever-shifting standards of beauty and age.
Went home and I had been fired. And when I called and I asked why.
For years, Ralph openly admitted she felt invisible in the industry. She took roles in movies and shows, but they rarely matched the caliber of her talent. She was cast as the supporting character, the mom, the background presence, while she should have been headlining. And as she grew older, the industry's ageism added another layer of dismissal. For many actors, that would have been the end. But Ralph kept working, kept showing up, kept proving she had staying power.
Endangered species, but I sing no victim song.
In Hollywood, Dash made an uncomfortable point about the abject lack of political diversity instead, and there have been more than a few people who have noticed her strength of convictions and asked.
Stacey Dash had the kind of breakout role most actresses dream of. As Dionne in Clueless, She was stylish, sharp-tongued, and unforgettable, the very definition of a 90s it girl. The film became a cult classic, and Dash's presence was a big part of why. She should have gone on to lead rom-coms, dramas, or at least stayed a steady fixture on screens like some of her co-stars did. Instead, her career flatlined, not because she lacked talent, but because she became one of Hollywood's most radioactive names after diving headfirst into politics.
I am Black and Mexican, so you don't have to dip me in anything. He'd like to, I'm sure.
Around 2014, Dash pivoted to Fox News as a political commentator. At first, it was surprising. Hollywood actors don't often cross over into that world. But she didn't just show up. She doubled down on incendiary takes that alienated the same communities who once adored her.
Because it's true, it is. And that's what Hollywood does. Hollywood pushes a liberal agenda to the rest of the country. And whether we like it or not, Hollywood dictates the culture of the country.
She questioned why Black History Month existed, took aim at figures like President Obama and Beyoncé, and often echoed right-wing talking points that clashed with both Black and liberal audiences. For many, it wasn't just that she had opinions. It was that she seemed to be actively turning her back on her own community for a paycheck and a platform.
You know, I've taken a lot of arrows, and a lot of people have told me keep my mouth shut or I won't work again. And I just say no. I won't be scared and to submit.
Fox eventually suspended her after she said Obama didn't give a damn about terrorism. Her contract wasn't renewed, and she faded from cable news just as quickly as she'd arrived, but the damage was permanent. When she tried to return to Hollywood, she found the doors closed. Studios didn't want to deal with the baggage, the controversy, or the divided audience her name now carried. The actress who once embodied youth, glam, and charm had been replaced by a public image that screamed political lightning rod.
Stacey Dash apologizes for her political past, stating, "I met
Italian actors. They had started to get me over to Italy every year to do press, and I said, "Why do you call me, not the other?" "Well, we like you because you're the bad guy." This is kind of working.
Gary Dourdan had everything going for him when CSI, Crime Scene Investigation, hit its stride. As Warwick Brown, the suave, sharp-witted investigator, he wasn't just another face in the lab. He was one of the most magnetic presences on the show. Fans loved him for his cool demeanor, his charisma, and the way he made science and crime-solving look effortlessly stylish.
There's a whole investigation going on. You think, oh, I work on CSI.
For 8 seasons, Dourdan was a cornerstone of one of the biggest TV franchises in history, part of a cast that dominated primetime and pulled in millions of viewers week after week. He seemed destined for the kind of long-term success actors dream of: steady work, fame, and the chance to break into bigger film roles. But behind the scenes, Gary's life was spiraling, and Hollywood doesn't forgive public meltdowns easily. It started with drugs. In 2008, not long after his run on CSI ended, Dourdan was arrested for possession. Though charges didn't stick the first time, the stain was there. Over the next few years, more incidents followed, including another arrest in 2011, and this time, the headlines didn't just mention drugs, but violence. He was charged with felony battery after allegedly assaulting his girlfriend and breaking her nose, landing him 5 years probation. For an actor once celebrated as the cool cop, those stories flipped his image overnight. Studios that once saw him as bankable suddenly saw him as a PR nightmare.
Understand how actors and actresses go bankrupt, but they do, and Gary Dourdan is the newest actor to join the list of bankrupt stars.
Then came the financial collapse. In 2012, Dourdan filed for bankruptcy, revealing he was buried under massive debt and unable to keep up with the lifestyle that stardom had built. Brandy Norwood was once untouchable, a true crossover star who conquered both music and television. In the 90s, she was everywhere. Her R&B career was unstoppable, with multi-platinum albums and hits like The Boy Is Mine, cementing her as one of the most influential voices of her era. At the same time, she became a cultural icon on the small screen with Moesha a show that wasn't just popular, but groundbreaking for its portrayal of a modern black teenage girl navigating family, friendships, and identity. For millions of fans, Brandy wasn't just a celebrity. She was the role model, the girl next door who also happened to be a global superstar. Her biggest cultural stamp came when she played Cinderella in Disney's 1997 Rodgers and Hammerstein's Cinderella, making history as the first black actress in the role. That single performance gave a whole generation of little girls permission to see themselves as princesses. At that point, Brandy looked unstoppable.
Was 2006 the worst time for you when you were involved in the accident and the woman was killed? Was that the worst?
That was one of the worst times in my life. You never wake up thinking that
Today's the day.
today's the day that something like this would happen.
But Hollywood has a cruel way of moving on, and Brandy found herself slipping out of the mainstream spotlight. She never stopped working. She kept releasing music and acting in various projects, but the momentum wasn't the same. The tragedy of a fatal 2006 car accident she was involved in, though she wasn't criminally charged, cast a long shadow over her career and made the media more focused on scandal than her artistry. Meanwhile, the industry that once crowned her queen shifted its attention to newer, younger stars, leaving Brandy caught in a cycle of being remembered, but not prioritized. For an artist of her caliber, it was a quiet sidelining that felt more like an erasure than a fall. Still, Brandy is proof that real talent never disappears. In the 2020s, she staged a strong comeback. She starred in ABC's Queens, reminding audiences of her acting and musical chops, and stepped back into her Cinderella crown in Disney Plus' Descendants, The Rise of Red in 2024. She also starred in Netflix's holiday movie, Best Christmas Ever, and even took on a horror role in The Front Room,